Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of On Air. Today I am joined by Andy Champion. Andy Champion is the GM for EMEA of Highspot. And he's joining me today to talk about a topic that we love on this because I think it's a really important topic that people talk about, don't often do well enough. We're talking about creating a culture of coaching, and Andy's suggested this topic is obviously something that's close to his heart and something he cares about a lot and feels is important within an organization. We'll get into topic in a minute. Andy, first and foremost, hello, how are you?
Good morning. I'm fantastic, thank you.
Good, glad to hear it. Well, thanks for joining us. Now, there'll be a number of people listening to this or watching this that know you or know of you, but also a number of people that don't. So perhaps you could start, as all of our guests do, by giving us just 2 minutes on who's Andy and who are Highspot.
Yeah, no worries at all. So my background, about 25 years in sales leadership. I've found a little bit of a niche for myself, helping predominantly US-based B2B SaaS companies bring their business and establish their business across EMEA. I've typically done that from sort of stage Series C through IPOs and beyond. I've had a couple of IPOs, one acquisition into Oracle. And, you know, look, it's my experience is what it is. It doesn't make me right, but I've had a few trips around the sun to try and figure out, you know, what's worked for me, what's not. And hopefully some of that might resonate with some of the audience today.
Love it. And tell us about Highspot. What do Highspot do?
Yeah, so we are a SaaS platform. We are all about helping salespeople be more effective in what they do. There's a lot of sales tech going on at the moment, and we are very, very focused about the behaviors, the skills that help sales leaders, founders, business leaders drive consistent execution across their sales teams.
Fantastic. Good start. So let's get into topic, because that's what we like to do. Quick 2 minutes, we're into topic and we're focusing on the bits that our audience can learn from you. So creating a culture of coaching. Let's maybe just take a step back to right at the beginning. What does that actually mean? Creating a culture of coaching. How would you define that?
So, you know, I think when I look back on some of my personal experience as an individual salesperson, you know, I've been an ADR, SDR, BDR, whatever you want to call it, right? The people that pick up the phone and reach out, hopefully in a coordinated manner, a thoughtful manner. During my time, I did it in recruitment, and literally my metric was 100 dials a day. I've been a salesperson. I've been a first line, second line, and now sort of third, fourth line leader. And as I reflect on my experiences, the time when I've thrived and the people around me have thrived is where the way in which we work just encourages learning, right? It reinforces the individual's natural curiosity and individual's natural desire to learn, but it does it in a systematic, scalable way, right? There's a deliberate process. There's a deliberate focus on helping people be better at what they do. And I've seen that very much in the sales context, but I would also argue that this applies to all other functions as well. You know, helping give people a blueprint, give them a recipe, help them understand how they are. And I've seen that, and literally in the moment, praising them when they're doing it really well, but also giving them encouragement where maybe there's a bit of a gap and there's an opportunity to improve. And I'm sure we'll jump into that. But you know, when I talk about creating a culture of coaching, it's seeing that sort of engagement, seeing that investment in our people across the entire organization.
I like that. Thank you. And I guess the obvious question is, why is it important? Why do companies need to be thinking this way?
Wow. Well, if you want to keep your people, you know, we were talking before about the Great Resignation that actually kind of never really happened. There's been a bit of a reshuffle, but you know, look, for people, for any leaders on the call, for any founders of companies, everyone will know, and even as individual contributors, right? The recruitment market right now is I've never seen anything like it in 25 years. It's very candidate centric. So for those candidates that would like to make a move, it's very easy for them to make the move. But of course, one of the best things that we can do to keep people engaged and keep people within their current employment is to help them see success, to help them drive the consistency in their performance, to help them learn the skills that they need for their next their next role, whether that be with us or whether that be with another company. So look, even if we get away from the topic of revenue, even if we get away from the topic of driving a differentiated experience for your customers, even if we get away, from how you want to turn up on a call as an individual contributor, one of the biggest reasons to have a culture of coaching is for retention, right? Is to keep your people engaged with your business so that they stay, and you don't have to go through the whole process of finding replacements when people leave. On average, there's lots of data around this, but on average, it takes somewhere between 2 and 3 years for an enterprise salesperson in a B2B SaaS environment to get to full productivity. 2 to 3 years. If you lose 1 or 2 of those people and they're your top performers, you're on a 3 to 4 year journey to replace them, right? By the time you bring them on board, you ramp them, let alone the knock-on impact to the rest of the team and the rest of the culture. So for me, one of the biggest reasons I want to invest and create that culture of coaching is I want my people to love what they do, to be effective at what they do, and I want to work with them for the long term.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how people respond when they see you as an organization, as a leader, proactively investing in their personal development and improvement? The level of engagement when they're at work, it's not just about keeping them, it's about them being engaged, being prepared to invest back to others. All of those things that you can't naturally measure and account for, that are potentially intangible, but geez, when you multiply them across lots of people, the difference that could make is extreme.
Yeah, and look, one of the measures that I think that I've always tried to look at to know whether am I doing a good job of this, right, or can I improve? Number one is to solicit feedback. That's pretty obvious. Ask people and create a safe environment where they'll tell you bluntly and honestly the truth, right? Even the difficult stuff. You have a safe environment to do that. But one of the measures that I look for is what I call discretionary effort. And that's people going above and beyond what is kind of mandated to them, what is required of them, but they're doing it of their own volition. They're doing it because they want to do it. Nobody's telling them to do it. They just figured out that that's what they want to do, and they're investing that time to go the extra mile. And that for me is one of the measures that you can look at around the organization. It's maybe not, it's not a hard KPI, but it's something that you can look at, you can observe, you can touch, and you can feel.
Mm. It's interesting talking about measures and how you measure coaching. I think that's one of the things that I've heard a few times that people find very difficult, that it's a challenge to actually tangibly measure it over a short period. Longer periods, absolutely, you can attribute increase in performance against coaching. What you're looking at that effort thing straight away by the sounds of things, which is interesting. It's that effort, engagement, application. Are there other things that you can look at reasonably quickly when you see the change in people, when you start to invest in coaching? Is it productivity? Can you see genuine output differences in a short space of time in your experience?
So I think you'll see, for those companies that do surveys of their staff, it's maybe more of a later stage, larger company thing than necessarily a sort of Series A, Series B thing. But one of the things I've seen time and time again is engagement scores go up. Involuntary or unwanted attrition goes down. So you will see those metrics. But look, I think the point is what I'd say is don't worry about the back end, right? Focus the time and energy on the front end, because there is no downside to this. There really is no downside whatsoever. And so focus on taking action. Don't worry about precisely how are you going to measure this. Don't worry about having to have the perfect framework for doing this, because it's going to be slightly different for each company, depending on their market, depending on their people, depending on their stage of growth. All of these things will influence. But what I would say is just start with a commitment. Start small and be prepared to work with your people to figure it out. Because, genuinely, you'll find deeper engagement, you'll find that loyalty come through, you will get productivity over time, but don't expect an immediate spike. We're talking about helping people change behaviors. And just like getting fit, it takes a bit of time, right? And the first time you go out for a run, a couple of days later, it hurts a bit, right? But then the next time you go out, it's a little bit easier, and the next time it's a bit easier. And before you know it, you've gone out and you've done your park run and you've smashed your target time for 5K, and then you got a 10K, right? So it's what I would say to people is, don't get hung up on the measurement. Just get started, make a commitment to it. And ultimately, there are benchmarks, and you'll see benchmarks of up to 20%. 20% of a leader's time should be spent on coaching. Now, I think that's aspirational. I can tell you I am not there yet. I am on my own personal journey towards this. That's a big commitment. But if I'm not investing in my people and my leadership team, where am I investing? Yeah, customers, right? Of course. But if I invest with the leadership, the team that I have, I get a 6, 8, 10 times return on that investment, because all of them are up leveling their game.
Interesting, isn't it? My next question was going to be, what percentage of somebody's time should they be being coached for? You've presenting it the other way, which is what percentage of a leader's time, and you can kind of translate that then into how many people are in their team. Is it group coaching, individual coaching? So maybe we could just explore some of the types of things that you see as coaching for an individual, and then maybe we can lead to, what percentage of someone's time is the optimum for them being coached? Because at some point they've got to do some work as well and actually have an effect. And it's getting that balance right, I would imagine.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to answer that in a slightly different way, and I'm going to start with what is not coaching, because that's really clear, right? And I'm going to give you an example from a sales organization. Coaching is not the forecast call. Coaching is not pipeline inspection. Coaching is not a deal review, an account review. There may be coaching opportunities within those conversations, but those are not coaching activities. Coaching activities are things like dedicated time with an individual to talk to them about where they are at with their journey. And typically, it involves asking more questions than giving answers. It's helping understand where are people. A great coaching conversation right now is to ask somebody, hey, we really love having you work here. Help me understand. You've got a lot of options. You're a top performer. What makes you want to stay here? Other conversations around, hey, talk to me about one of your highlights of the last week. Talk to me about something that you're really stuck on at the moment. And just opening up those conversations, and as I say, those very deliberate opportunities. And it doesn't need to be a huge amount of time. The focus is on quality. The focus as the coacher, the person that is coaching, is to listen, to engage, is to have the flexibility to go where that person needs to go, right? And try and avoid the temptation of giving them the answers. It's always, it's one of the traps I fall into time and time again. I think because I've been doing this for a few years that I've always got the answers. And actually, do you know what? I'm learning from the people around me every single day. And the more I listen, the more I learn. So I would say, it's about creating that space, that dedicated space on a regular basis. It's about setting the expectation coming into that conversation that it is a safe zone, that the focus is on the person, and the focus is not on inspecting their business. It's about their skills. It's about what they're achieving. It's about where they're stuck and how there may be resources around them, including their own experience, to help them through that. And then the other type of coaching, Owen, is it is really important actually is those almost real-time coaching moments that we all get. You're on maybe you're in an account review, or you're on a prospecting call with one of your team, and you're listening and you're observing, and of course you're making notes. Maybe they're trying a new skill, right? Maybe they're trying some new messaging. And of course, coming off of that call, coming off of that conversation, you've got a really magical moment there to engage with them. If you're deliberate about this, to ask them how they thought it went, and then ask them whether they would be open to some feedback. And then when you give that feedback, be very specific, right? Be thoughtful, limit it to like one or two areas. Don't try and dissect the whole call. Just choose maybe 2 or 3 very key points. Be specific in the examples. Understand why perhaps they led it that way, and then offer a different view. Offer a view of, but that's fantastic. One of the things you might like to think about in the future is X, Y, Z. Those in the moment coaching opportunities are incredibly effective in terms of helping people understand what good looks like in a way that is more difficult when you're sort of one step removed in a one-to-one meeting or a classroom situation or whatever it might be. So finding those moments during the working week on top of the regular one-to-ones, absolutely, the game changing.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because what I'm hearing from you is that there are 2 very natural, organic opportunities for us to coach. With things we're already doing, it's maybe just flipping the way that we have that conversation. So from a time consumption perspective for you as a leader, it doesn't even have to be an investment of additional time to have an impact. You're already, in theory, doing one-to-ones at a regular pattern. It might be that you're doing too much talking, you're not asking questions, maybe you're not taking a coaching approach, and you're already in live environments with them, and maybe giving that feedback in a different way. 2 great opportunities to develop a culture of coaching by doing the things you're doing just slightly differently. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, and look, there's a dirty little secret in all of this, and that is that quite often people that have been moved into management roles, they're not born innately. Very few people are born innately knowing how to coach effectively, and particularly if you've moved up from being an individual contributor into, your first or second leadership role. Coaching is a skill that one needs to learn. You need to develop your own style of leadership, your own style of coaching. But there are some basic tenets of coaching, and I think for business leaders and those people that are really interested in developing managers, in the same way as we're talking here about helping individual contributors create and develop skills, let's not forget that we need to do the same for our managers. We need to help our managers understand what good coaching looks like and what it does not look like. And quite often I'll when I talk about this, I'll talk about concept of baking a loaf of bread. I mean, it's a bit crazy, but it's something we can all relate to, right? And if you took 100 people and you put them in a really big kitchen, you said, hey, go bake me a sourdough, 1 or 2 would probably come out with a pretty good sourdough. But the other 97, 98, it'd be pretty hit and miss. Some would have complete disasters. Some, might have something that's vaguely resembles a loaf, but just tastes like stodge. And the point here is, if you took those same 100 people and you put them in the same kitchen, but you gave them the specific ingredients that they needed, and then you gave them a recipe card and said, hey, this is how to combine those ingredients. This is the order in which to do it. Here's a really important part when you need to actually rest your dough to allow it to prove. Here's the temperature to set your oven at. By the way, when you put your loaf in the oven, put a big bowl of water in there, because humidity is really important when you're cooking sourdough. Probably you'd flip it around the other way, and 90 plus people would produce a pretty good loaf. At least it would be edible, right? And it's the same with coaching. You can say to people, yeah, just get on with coaching. Or you can give them a recipe, you can give them a blueprint, you can give them a starter, you can work with them as they go through their coaching journey to provide coaching on their coaching. And if you do that, you're probably going to find that your managers are going to bake a better coaching loaf of bread than if you just put them in the kitchen and let them get on with it.
I'm going to stay on your baking bread analogy for a minute because I like it. I do like a freshly baked loaf of bread as well. But is it fair to say, keen to get your commentary on this, that if you're able to create a genuine culture where coaching is at the heart of it, what you also potentially get is peer-to-peer naturally. So instead of it always being on the leader to coach, you are seeing people or you have people in the team who see the benefits of being coached, and therefore they are more likely to naturally coach. So I'm going back to your baking bread analogy. Actually, you put those 98 people in separate rooms. They are 100 people, 98 of them do, not so good job. 2 of them know what to do anyway. Put them in the same room. Guess what?
Yep.
The people who know what they're doing, somebody spots them and says, "Oh, how do you do that?" And it starts to organically move across to actually few people are smart enough to ask the right questions of those people. Those people say, actually, people are looking to me. I'm going to help that person and that person, because I've seen the benefit of being coached. And I would hazard a guess that if you put those 100 people in the same room, probably closer to 20-30% would produce something good just naturally because they're taking the advice of people who are further along with them, which leads me back to that sort of peer-to-peer coaching, which happens without you as a leader needing to do anything because you're creating the right culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I was reading an article that one of our account managers shared on. We use Slack, and she chose of her own volition to share it. And one of the points in the article that really resonated with me was around resilient teams. And I can't quite remember the precise quote, but basically it was an HBR article, and it said that one of the characteristics of resilient teams is that they have an open they have an open environment where there's a level of accountability and constructive feedback. And that I think is resonates here, right? Because that culture of feedback, constructive feedback, that peer-to-peer. And by the way, it's not just peer-to-peer, manager to employee, it's also the other way around, right? If I want to go and learn how to be a better leader, the best place for me to start is with my people, and going and having a deliberate conversation saying, hey guys, I don't get everything right. Can you help me understand some of the things that would make a difference to you? And that resilience, that peer-to-peer feedback. Imagine a culture. What would it be like in your business if you had that culture right now, where everybody was in it with each other, everybody was helping one another, picking each other up, because we all stumble from time to time, and I would argue, unless we have those moments of failure, we're probably not pushing the boundaries hard enough, right? So failure is almost, in many ways, it's something to be celebrated. As long as you only fail once on the same thing and then learn from it, that's a good thing, right? But having that endemic across the entire organization, it removes that single point of failure, and it's addictive, right? It is hugely addictive.
Is there ever a time where coaching doesn't work? So I think you touched earlier on what isn't coaching, but let's say we're applying the right mindset.
Yep.
I'm trying to get my head around, is it like, I always use the analogy of property. Property rarely goes backwards in our lifetime. It's, investing in property is usually a good idea. It might have a short-term negative impact, but generally over 5-10 years, you're going to be moving forwards. Fairly safe investment. Is it the same with coaching? Is it that, okay, we might not get a win out of every individual coaching session, but over a period of time, you're always going to move forwards?
Yes, and yes, I think that coaching is when coaching is done well, it is an ongoing journey, right? And by the way, you never get to the destination, right? So enjoy that journey, commit to that journey. But the other thing here is to remember that as we go on that journey, and there's a really great model that listeners might want to look at, and that's around situational leadership. And the simplistic view is that when somebody is just starting a new skill for the first time, you need to be more directive with them than when somebody's done it for 20 years and has mastered it, right? And it's really obvious when you stop and think about it, but it's such an easy thing to miss in the moment. And when you're in those coaching conversations, it's really important that we all pause and we think about the person we're trying to help, and we understand where are they starting, because if they're right at the beginning of that journey, they actually don't know what good looks like, and they probably don't know that they don't know.
Yeah.
And so we have to start with helping them understand what what good looks like. What is that model? What are some of the behaviors? We're probably going to have to show them very directly, either through modeling the behavior ourselves or pointing to other people that are demonstrating that already, right? And there are lots of technologies out there now that allow you to take snippets of calls or meetings and show what a good objection handling is, or whatever it might be. And then, of course, once you've shown somebody, you can start to support them as they model that behavior. You can give that real-time feedback in terms of, hey, so this is what you did well, here's an area to think about, and you can help them along that journey. So it's important as the coach to understand where your people are on their journey, and then to adjust your coaching style specific to where they are. Don't try not to apply a one size fits all, because your more experienced people are likely to respond differently to your less experienced people.
Yeah, and we're rocketing towards the end of our conversation. I'm keen to just ask you one question, which is whether you've got any real sort of success stories around coaching, whether that be in an organization where maybe you've come in and there hasn't been that culture and you've been able to implement it and you've seen an uptick, or with an individual perhaps, but whether you've got a sort of real life story where you've seen coaching by yourself or somebody else really have a positive impact.
Yeah, look, I mean, there are many stories, or there are at least a few. And one of my greatest rewards is to see the people that I have worked with over time grow their careers.
Yeah.
And perhaps feel that I've had a small influence upon that. I take great joy in that, but I'm also, I try and keep myself grounded in that I'm only a really small part, right? As a coach, as a mentor, I can open the door, but that person has to walk through it. And one of the things we haven't touched on is, part of coaching is creating a culture of accountability. Right.
Yeah.
I can take you on a journey, Owen, but unless you commit to it, the coaching is going to be ineffective, because you've got to lean in, right? As an athlete, you've got to do the training. Your
Yep.
coach can advise you, hey, don't do heavy weights today, do light weights. But unless you go to the gym, it doesn't matter, right? So I think, look, there's one particular chap that I work with. I remember hiring him into a company I worked with in the MarTech sector. And he'd been a mechanic at the time, but had a bit of a spark of magic. Came in as an SDR, driving that outbound demand generation stuff that very, very well. And then he absolutely smashed it. He just had that natural curiosity about him. He just wanted to get better, and so he then got promoted over time into an AE. He learned the skills. He then started to deploy the skills. He succeeded at that. Not initially. Took a bit of time. New role, new skills developed, but absolutely smashed it. I then left, and a couple of years later, I had an opportunity, and I brought him into the organization I was working with as a senior AE, a senior individual contributor. And then a couple of years ago, he was looking to make the move. He always wanted to get into sales leadership. I mean, you got to be crazy to do that, but he was crazy enough. And I remember him calling me up and saying, Andy, I've got this fantastic opportunity. It's for third line leadership role, and I've never done sales leadership. Can you help me think about how I conduct myself and the things I point to during the interview process. And we worked on that together over sort of 2 or 3 months. And the short version is that he got the job. And not only did he get the job, but he's also been smashing records every single quarter and every single year since. And so, for me to feel that I had part of his journey, he'd have probably done it anyway, but to feel that maybe I had a small part in helping him believe that he could do that is incredibly rewarding. And that's the thing with coaching, right? It's about watching people develop over years, not days.
Yeah, I can sense the pride in your voice when you talk about that as well, for what it's worth. So yeah, I think it's a lovely story. And actually, you've touched on one final thing. So I lied. I am going to ask one more question, which is just around, like you said, the individual responsibility. Because I think there's a notion that as individual contributors, we kind of have to rely on the organisation to coach us. But actually, do you know what? There's content out there. There's opportunities to learn left, right, and centre. There's events. There's communities. Individuals have a responsibility to some degree to self-coach as well, or to find other ways that they can get coaching outside of their direct line manager. Is that something that you would agree with? And if so, how would you be encouraging people to go about doing that?
Oh, 100%, right? No matter how much your manager cares about your career, nobody cares about your career as much as you do.
Yeah, good.
So never forget that. But also be open and engaging with your leadership. If you're an individual contributor or if you're a manager seeking coaching, look, be open with that with your line manager and say, hey, look, I'm really looking to develop. I want some help. And I think, politely require and demand it of your organization, because if you're not getting it where you are, then there are plenty of organizations that will give you this. And to be honest, everybody deserves that opportunity, right? One thing I've learned over time is that the most significant people in your career are your manager and your manager's manager. So have an explicit conversation with them about the journey that you want to go on and how they can help you. But remember that the responsibility does sit with you. They can be part of it, but they're only part of it. And go and seek opportunities, whether it's online or at events, to learn from others. Be deliberate in reaching out to people through tools like LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd like some advice. I'd like some mentoring. Because do you know what? Most of the time, if you ask people and you are polite and respectful in how you do it, most of the time people will say yes. And most of the time people are happy to help you.
Yeah, I love that. Andy, thank you so much. I genuinely really enjoyed listening to your ideas and your experience, and I think there's a lot that our audience can take from what you shared today. 2 questions for you to wrap up. One is, who should be talking to Highspot about what Highspot do? Because we wouldn't, it would be fair to bring you on here and you give your time and not at least give you the opportunity to suggest that. And if so, how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk with you?
So the easiest way of reaching me is andy.champion@highspot.com. And I promise I will return the email. Maybe not next week because I've got some time out, but I will respond. And by the way, I'm happy if people just got some follow-up questions around this. Just drop me a note, and if I can be of help, I will be. In terms of Highspot, look, I mean, anybody that has a sales organization, internal or external, that wants to drive up the consistency of performance, that wants to drive revenue, that wants to maybe help create that culture of coaching in a structured manner, Highspot is a good place to start. It's not the only place to start, but if you want to do it at scale, then the platform can certainly help with that.
And with all of the content that goes out, as always, we'll tag Highspot and Andy in this so that you can follow the links and see if you want to go and have a conversation with him and with Highspot. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Very much appreciated. We hope to have you on again in the future. Maybe we can pick another topic that you're equally passionate about. But for now, thank you very much.
My very great pleasure.